A 50-year-old mystery was recently solved when a group of intellectuals decoded a message from the Zodiac Killer.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most unsettling mysteries that were eventually solved.
But in 1937, a new written account is found, and it's a bombshell.
Number 50, Lindy Chamberlain Creighton. It's possible you've heard the phrase, "a dingo ate my baby."
I have lost my fiancé, the poor baby.
Maybe the dingo ate your baby.
It's often used for humor, but unfortunately, the story is tragically genuine. In 1980, Lindy Chamberlain Creighton famously claimed that a dingo carried away her 9-week-old daughter Azaria while they were camping at Ayers Rock in Australia. No one believed her. Her story was widely mocked, resulting in the aforementioned jokes, and she was even convicted of murdering her daughter. What truly happened to young Azaria remained a mystery for 6 years. But in February 1986, the child's jacket was found buried near a dingo lair just outside Ayers Rock. Owing to the new evidence, Chamberlain Creighton was released from prison, and her life sentence was remitted.
I think that the jury, like the rest of us, knew that she was guilty. Quite wrong, but that was the fact. We couldn't shake off that feeling.
Number 49, Weeping Statues.
It's a statue of the Virgin Mary that appears to be crying tears inside a Reading shop.
9 News reporter Janelle Walton was inside the shop. Janelle, what did you see?
You've probably seen it on the news or in a movie. A religious statue is weeping, and usually some kind of red liquid just to make it that much creepier. This phenomenon is often associated with miracles, as, a statue should not be crying. However, there are many non-religious reasons why a statue might be crying. In some cases, the water is nothing but condensation, and if the statue is made of porous materials, moisture can seep through and resemble tears. There also might be psychological perceptions at play, or just good old-fashioned tampering for the sake of fame and attention. Even the Catholic Church ignores weeping statues for the most part, and have called out a number of examples as hoaxes.
You're imagining it. 3 of us saw it, Aaron. How do you explain that?
Sleep deprivation? Parano? Delusional personality disorder.
Number 48, the Ariel Castro kidnappings.
But family members told ABC News overnight they are in a state of shock and had no idea anyone was living in the home with him. Neighbors say Castro, a father of 3, was a loner who occasionally parked his bus on the street, but usually kept to himself.
Between 2002 and 2004, 3 young women disappeared from the streets of Cleveland. They were Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus. Their whereabouts remained unknown for approximately 10 years. It was one of the most tantalizing true crime cases in the city's history, with many people theorizing about their disappearance. Answers were finally provided on May 6, 2013, when a man named Charles Ramsey heard cries for help coming from 2207 Seymour Avenue. He helped free Amanda Berry, and together they called 911. When police arrived, they also found and rescued both Knight and DeJesus. The house belonged to a man named Ariel Castro, who had kidnapped the women and kept them imprisoned for a decade, subjecting them to horrific abuse.
And you had no indication that there was anything going on?
Bro, not a clue that girl was in that house, or anybody else was in there against their will.
Number 47, the trunk bones.
Sometimes from the most unlikely elements comes a tantalizing mystery, and confirmation that the truth is stranger than fiction. The mystery might start, say, with this broken-down footlocker. Who can guess what the old trunk might contain?
Back in 1987, a man named John David Morris offered a shed to Newell Sessions, telling him that he could have it in exchange for moving it off his property. So Sessions took the shed to his home in Thermopolis, Wyoming, and there it sat for a number of years. In 1992, Sessions decided to open a trunk that had been sitting in the shed, and inside he found a human skeleton. Authorities found that the mystery person had been murdered. It wasn't until 2017 that the bones were positively identified as belonging to Joseph Mulvaney, a World War II veteran who disappeared in 1963. Mulvaney was Morris's stepfather.
I don't believe that Gabby was the person that caused the death to this person, but my thoughts have always been that he has knowledge of who the person in the trunk is or where they came from.
Number 46, the body in room 348.
I got to finally address My thoughts to this man, who had he simply come forward, this would have been a completely different, quote, accident.
On September 15, 2010, police found 55-year-old Greg Flanagan dead in his Beaumont hotel room. There was no sign of forced entry, and Flanagan's large stack of cash was undisturbed, which ruled out foul play. Yet when Flanagan was taken to the medical examiner, they found severe internal damage caused by blunt force trauma. So how did Flanagan die and who attacked him? The answer is almost ludicrous. Investigators found a tiny hole in the wall of Flanagan's room, and from there, the story unraveled. A man named Lance Mueller was staying in the adjacent room and was handling his small handgun when it accidentally discharged, sending the bullet through the wall and into Flanagan's chest. It was a terrible accident, and Mueller was given 10 years in prison for manslaughter.
And when they saw the body being taken out of the room, there was ever any doubt at that point, did I hurt somebody? To still not have the moral capacity to come forward, that's scary to me that people walk around like that.
Number 45, the McStay family murders.
In your gut, what do you think happened?
I have absolutely no clue.
Back in February of 2010, the McStay family was officially declared missing. They were not in contact with any family members, and when Joseph McStay's brother climbed into their Fallbrook house, he found it empty. There was no sign of foul play, and the family's dogs were still alive in the backyard. 3 long years elapsed with no further word until November 11, 2013, when a motorcyclist found the buried remains of the McStay family in the Mojave Desert. It was just one mystery after another. That is, until the arrest of one Charles Merritt. Merritt was a business associate of Joseph McStay, and investigators found that he murdered Joseph and his family in order to steal money from his business account.
Now he sees a very different Chase Merritt.
To me, it looked like a broken man. He knew he was done.
Number 44, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse.
Should pale death with treble dread make the ocean caves our bed, God, who hears the surges roll, deign to save our suppliant soul.
Everyone loves a creepy lighthouse story, and the Flannan Isles disappearance has to be one of the best. In December of 1900, a passing ship noticed that the light on Flannan Isles was out and went to investigate. None of the lighthouse keepers was present, and their living quarters were orderly. Everything was in place, and there was even an uneaten meal on the table. There was also a considerable amount of destruction on the west landing, including a broken box of equipment and bent iron railings. It's certainly a creepy sight, but with a rather mundane explanation. It's now widely believed that the men ran out to secure their equipment in a storm and were washed away by a destructive rogue wave.
Northeasterly wind will come soon, a-blowing like Gabriel's horn. Best board up them signal-house windows. Aye, sir.
Number 43, the Bermuda Triangle.
Vast, ominous, mythical. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, one of the greatest mysteries of our time.
Everyone knows of the mythical Bermuda Triangle. Found between Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and the Florida coast, the triangle is said to be a hotspot of paranormal activity, prone to swallowing ships and planes and leaving their fates unknown. It's one of the most enduring mysteries of American pop culture. Only there isn't really a mystery, and this has been known since at least the mid-70s. That's when Larry Cush published the Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, and posited that the triangle does not have a higher incident rate than any other part of the ocean. Furthermore, many of the original stories were either highly exaggerated or just outright made up. It's just a fun story and nothing more.
Using the terminology of today, you would call the triangle.
Well, I mean, this is the oldest fake news story in the world. I mean, this has been around for a long time, and, people build on it.
Number 42, Lady of the Dunes.
We are standing here today to announce that after nearly a half-century of investigative efforts, we have identified the oldest unidentified homicide victim in Massachusetts, known as the Lady of the Dunes.
On July 26, 1974, a 12-year-old girl stumbled upon a decomposing body in the sand dunes of Race Point Beach in Provincetown, Massachusetts. The body showed severe damage, indicating that the woman had been brutally murdered. Despite an extensive investigation, the police were unable to identify the woman, and she became known as the Lady of the Dunes. And that's how she stayed for nearly 50 years, until 2022, when an FBI field office in Boston announced a positive development. DNA had been taken from the woman's remains, and they matched one Ruth Marie Terry. Police now believe that Terry was murdered by her husband, Guy Moldavan, who died in 2002 and escaped justice for Terry's death.
I can't wait to get down to her grave in Provincetown myself and just, I don't know what'll happen. I'll probably cry, and I'll just probably say, Ruth, we know who you are. It happened.
Number 41, BTK.
And it shows here that was last saved by Dennis. So somehow a Dennis who was affiliated with the church or the library was somehow involved with this document.
Some serial killers are brought down thanks to clever police work, and some are brought down through sheer hubris. BTK terrorized the greater Wichita area between 1974 and 1991, murdering at least 10 individuals and taunting the police with threatening letters. Despite their best efforts, police were unable to identify BTK, and the case remained a mystery for decades. But in 2004, BTK once again started corresponding with the media and police, taunting them with decades-old murder cases. He ultimately sent a floppy disk to the Wichita station KSAS-TV, and police used metadata from the disk to trace its sender. And with this, Dennis Rader was caught and identified as BTK. He was arrested in 2005, 31 years after murdering his first victim.
On the table before them, the computer disk traced back to Rader.
Anyway, you can get out the DNA, right?
You can't get out your DNA unless you've had a total blood transfer and lost every organ. It's there.
He knew that DNA was, he had studied enough that he knew that that was going to be it.
Number 40, the surgeon's photograph.
1934. The first photo of the supposed Loch Ness Monster incites public frenzy and a torrent of tourists looking for Nessie.
It's one of the most famous photographs in cryptozoology, a massive dinosaur-like head emerging from Scotland's Loch Ness. The photo has entranced the public ever since its publication in 1934, with many believing it to be verifiable proof of the elusive Loch Ness Monster. But even for those who didn't believe in the mythical monster, a lingering question still remained. What exactly was this? It wasn't until the 1990s that we got firm answers. In 1991, a man named Christian Sperling admitted that the photo was a hoax, having built the monster using a toy submarine and wood putty. He then conspired with a number of others in order to fool the Daily Mail into publishing a bogus story, which it famously did.
So using plastic, wood, and a toy submarine, they create this model of a creature with a long neck and a small head.
Number 39, the Solway Firth Spaceman.
A picture is said to be worth 1,000 words. But what happens when something in the picture can't be explained?
Chances are that you've seen this photo on your many adventures around the internet. A little girl looks into the camera, while behind her head emerges a creepy figure that looks like an astronaut. The photographer, Jim Templeton, claims that no one but him, his daughter, and his wife were in the immediate vicinity. Did you pick up on that clue? Yep, this supposed spaceman is just Templeton's wife. It's likely that Templeton didn't see her through the viewfinder, as that make of camera obscured about 30% of the image. Her pale blue dress was then overexposed, appearing as white in the photograph. Add her dark bobbed hair, and you have a figure that looks suspiciously like an astronaut.
Can we solve a 50-year-old mystery? So here is our attempt to recreate the phenomenon of the Solway Spaceman. Proof enough? You decide.
Number 38, Charlie No Face. A legend spread around the Pittsburgh area throughout the 1970s and 80s, with people telling of a man without a face who wandered the streets at night. This man was Charlie No Face. For many, this was nothing but a mystery, a creepy urban legend meant to scare those braving the nighttime dark. Unfortunately, and to the surprise of many locals, the story was real. Charlie No Face was actually a man named Raymond Robinson, who was tragically disfigured in a childhood accident. Unwilling to be seen in public, he would spend his days at home before going for walks at night. Some would see him on his walks and spread the story, resulting in an urban legend rooted in truth. Number 37, the Dog Bridge.
In 1995, he is walking his 5-year-old Labrador, Drift.
It was a normal Sunday afternoon, beautiful day, and it just leapt right over the bridge.
Many people have heard of the famous Dog Bridge in Scotland, off of which dozens of pups have supposedly jumped to their deaths. The stories claim that dogs will act normally until they get on the bridge, whereupon they fly into a frenzy and launch themselves off the structure to the rocky gorge below. Many people believe that the bridge is cursed and that some kind of supernatural phenomenon is behind it. Alas, there is a real explanation. A number of professional investigations have found that the dogs are drawn to the scent of mammals, either in the gorge below or nesting in the side of the structure. They get excited, hop up to investigate, and topple off the tapered wall of the bridge.
They've no concept of what's on the other side. They can't see the drop. So basically, they're going from level ground to a 60-foot drop. And it's only when they get to the other side that they realize what's happened to them.
Number 36, the Lake Nyos disaster.
Lake Nyos looks as stunning as ever. It's hard to imagine that this breathtaking landscape could cause so many deaths. Yet it did, 30 years ago.
Something very weird happened at Cameroon's Lake Nyos on August 21st, 1986. It suddenly erupted, sending an enormous cloud shooting into the air at 60 miles per hour. The water in the lake turned red while the cloud fell to the ground, suffocating nearby villages and killing 1,746 people. The event seems almost biblical. What actually happened was the very rare limnic eruption, which is when a huge amount of carbon dioxide explodes from the bottom of a deep lake. The deep iron-rich water rose to the surface and was oxidized, turning it red, and the cloud of expelled carbon dioxide fell to the ground as CO2 is heavier than oxygen. Unfortunately, it suffocated many who lay in its path.
It was at night. I was asleep with my children. I heard an explosion but didn't make much of it. When I woke up the next morning, I discovered some of my children were dead. Those who were still alive would cough out some powdery substance. I was also affected.
Number 35, the Windsor Hum.
I've been listening to it for a while. It gets very aggravating. I'm outside quite a bit because I'm a smoker and I listen to it constantly.
There are a weird number of hums heard throughout the world, each described as a persistent and irritating whine. One of the most notable examples was found in Windsor, Ontario. The sound was described by many as a low droning vibration, and it was loud enough that one evening in 2012, over 20,000 people reported it to the local police. Alas, the mystery was finally solved in 2020, and thousands of annoyed residents could finally rest easy. Literally, the sound was sourced to nearby Zug Island, a heavily industrialized area just off Detroit, and specifically the blast furnaces operated by U.S. Steel. When these furnaces were deactivated in April of that year, the sound ceased and peace was restored.
To hear the folks at United States Steel tell it, this is not permanent. No mothballs, no shuttering of a plant. They're calling it an indefinite idling as they try and make their operation more efficient.
Number 34, Crockerland.
Did he tell you what we're supposed to do?
I did.
Well?
He wants us to move the island.
The 19th and 20th centuries were filled with brilliant adventures into the Earth's poles, but you probably haven't heard of the Crockerland expedition. American explorer and Navy officer Robert E. Peary described an enormous mountainous land that he could see from Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic. He named it Crockerland after his financial backer George Crocker, and an expedition set out to find and map it. Yet they found no such island, despite its supposedly immense size. It simply didn't exist. What a tantalizing mystery. No, seriously, it didn't exist. As we later learned through his personal diary, Peary made the whole thing up, probably to secure more funding from an excited Crocker.
Where's the island? Where's the island?
Number 33, J.C. Dugard.
And they have lived with the questions, the rumors that have swirled ever since.
I heard she was buried around here, and I heard she wasn't. You know, my neighbor up the street said he saw her get snagged, so.
On June 10, 1991, 11-year-old J.C. Dugard was kidnapped in Myers, California while walking to school. Numerous people witnessed the abduction, but the trail quickly went cold, and what ultimately happened to the abducted girl remained a painful question for many in the community. But an answer was finally provided in August 2009 when a man named Philip Garrido brought his daughters to the University of California, Berkeley. The odd behavior of the girls attracted attention, and Garrido was ordered to take them to a parole officer. He brought with him the girl's mother, who called herself Alyssa. Investigators were quickly able to deduce that Alyssa was actually a grown J.C. Dugard, who, through continuous acts of abuse, had given birth to the two girls.
This is the place where J.C. was held prisoner for 18 years, and where police say she was forced to raise the two children she had with the kidnapper.
Number 32, the Salish Sea discoveries.
It is becoming all too common in BC. Another foot has washed up on shore, this time in Richmond, and it looks like a woman's left foot in a New Balance running shoe.
The western coast of North America is the site of one of the most gruesome mysteries in modern history. Beginning in the summer of 2007, a number of human feet, often still inside their shoes, have washed ashore in British Columbia, Tacoma, and Seattle. A number of macabre theories have been put forth, including the possibility of a serial killer. But the reality is far more mundane. People die at sea, often in tragic boating accidents, and their bodies decompose in the water. As this happens, the extremities, like hands and feet, break away from the body. And because the feet are trapped inside the shoes, they are mostly saved from decomposition and buoyed, allowing them to float to shore in the currents.
Shoes and feet washing up. There's been a dozen of them or so, and you hear about them over the years, and it's just kind of a unique local phenomenon.
Number 31, Roswell.
After his report becomes publicized, it inspires other people to report that they have also seen bizarre phenomena in the skies, and we are in the midst of flying saucer fever.
Behold, a historic event that gave rise to a phenomenon. The UFO craze started in the summer of 1947 when something crashed in the New Mexico desert. The military's response raised a few eyebrows, especially when they changed their explanation from a flying disc to a weather balloon. It wasn't until 1980 that the UFO conspiracy truly took hold thanks to the seminal book, The Roswell Incident. But the mystery was answered in 1994 when the U.S. Air Force published a report claiming that the debris was from a top-secret military balloon designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. The report admits they didn't want this information released, so they made up the cover story about the weather balloon. Of course, some people still aren't convinced.
And when you put all that stuff together and spin it, you find that it fits perfectly with many of the occurrences in Roswell during that era.
Number 30, the Long Island serial killer. It was one of the most absorbing mysteries of the early 21st century. Who killed all those women in New York? The Long Island serial killer murdered at least 11 victims since the early 1990s and disposed of most of their bodies throughout the Gilgo Beach area.
4 of them now officially listed as victims of this serial killer that's been dubbed the Long Island Ripper.
The killings remained a mystery until the summer of 2023, when a 59-year-old architect named Rex Andrew Hewerman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder.
This is the man police have taken into custody.
DNA has officially linked Hewerman to many of the victims. As of June 2024, he's been charged with 6 of the murders and is currently pleading not guilty.
His court-appointed attorney entering a not guilty plea on his behalf.
Number 29, the burial place of Richard III. Mysterious deaths will always be intriguing and a little creepy, especially when they involve someone as famous as Richard III. The King of England was killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, making him the final English king to die in battle.
Conducted with conspicuous bravery, Richard became the last King of England to die on the battlefield.
And then we just sort of forgot where he was. Oops. Richard's body was buried in the Greyfriars Church in Leicester, but the tomb was lost and erased from history when the church was demolished in 1536. Time passed on, a king was lost, and the old church grounds were turned into a parking lot. But it was in this parking lot that Richard was finally found in 2012, 476 years after his tomb was turned to rubble. Number 28, the case of Margie Jelovic. While working at her mother's Indiana tavern, Margie Jelovic met a biker named Randy Yeager, who rode with a gang called the Outlaws.
What's your name? I haven't seen you here before.
My name's Margie.
Margie, how do you do? My name's Randy.
The gang was reportedly incredibly violent and under numerous investigations for the likes of racketeering, robberies, and even various bombings and murders. Jelovic devoted herself to and defended Yeager, becoming paranoid that the police were after them. In September of 1997, she up and vanished.
Wherever she is gone, she has not traveled there in her car. Her family is as perplexed as they are worried.
Her asthma inhaler was left behind, suggesting that she had been taken against her will. But that was not the case. It wasn't until October of 2014 that Jelinek and Yeager were found living together in Mexico. Unfortunately, Jelinek was killed while driving away from the police. Yeager was caught and given a 15-year prison sentence.
Yeager has been on the run since 1997.
Number 27, the disappearance of Stardust. Airplanes simply up and disappearing will always be a disturbing subject. A famous case occurred on August 2, 1947, when a plane named Stardust vanished while flying from Argentina to Chile.
Then the plane sent one final mysterious Morse code message. Stendek.
The plane never arrived at the airport, and a search and rescue operation ended in failure when they couldn't locate the aircraft. It was simply gone.
After that, nothing more was heard from the plane.
And it would remain missing for over 5 decades. After years of conspiracy theories, the wreck of Stardust was found by 2 mountaineers in Mount Tupungato in the late 90s. Further study seemed to show that the pilots likely became mistaken about their location, having encountered a jet stream, and accidentally flew into the cloud-obscured mountain. The crash then started an avalanche, which buried the plane and prevented rescuers from finding it.
After the devastating crash, Stardust was buried within seconds.
Number 26, young Monica Bonilla. The marriage of Guillermo and Rosemary Bonilla began to collapse after the murder of John Lennon in 1980. Not long after, Guillermo Bonilla began dressing and acting like Lennon, telling Rosemary that he was the reincarnated musician. On September 22, 1982, Rosemary finished work and came home to find nothing in it anymore, including furniture, belongings, Guillermo, and their young daughter Monica. Years later, an episode of Unsolved Mysteries told of the disappearance of one Nylene Marshall.
For over 7 years, Nylene's family has been trapped by the agony of not knowing what happened to her.
A school official in Vancouver contacted the producers, claiming that a student named Mary Ann Kelly may be the missing Marshall. The FBI investigated Kelly and discovered that she was not Nylene Marshall, but the also missing Monica Bonilla instead. She was safely returned to her mother, who called the bizarre coincidence God's will. Number 25, the Mary Celeste. It's probably the most famous ghost ship in North American history. On December 4, 1872, the Mary Celeste was found floating and abandoned off Western Europe. The boat was in fair condition, while both its cargo and the crew's belongings were mostly accounted for.
10 persons, the captain, his family, and crew, had vanished without trace.
While we're still not 100% sure what happened, many commentators believe that something very, very worrying had to have occurred.
The men found working charts, but not the ship's papers, nor her navigational instruments or maps.
The explosive theory is one of the most popularly accepted ones, carrying over 1,700 barrels of alcohol. It's likely that the barrels started seeping, causing either an intense smell of gas or a small pressure wave explosion that would have left behind no scorching or soot. Either way, it's likely that the captain ordered the crew into the yawl and, in a panic, failed to secure it to the boat. The ship then drifted away, leaving the men to die on the open ocean.
Now, with the help of an international team of experts, the true story of the Mary Celeste can finally be told.
Number 24, the Freeman arson. At 5:30 a.m. on the morning of December 30th, 1999, police were notified of a fire at the house of Danny and Kathy Freeman.
It's a cold, dark morning when the volunteer fire department is called to extinguish a devastating trailer fire.
Inside, they found the corpses of Kathy and Danny, both of whom had been shot. Missing was the Freemans' teenage daughter Ashley and Ashley's friend Laura Bible, who was sleeping over that night. The crime wasn't solved for nearly 20 years.
The girls literally fell off the face of the earth. There is no clothes, no phone calls, nothing.
In April of 2018, 66-year-old Ronnie Busick was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder, including those of Bible and Ashley Freeman. It's believed that Busick and 2 others, Warren Welch and David Pennington, both dead, killed the Freemans, torched their house, and kidnapped the teens. Busick pled guilty and served just 38 months of his 10-year sentence, thanks to, quote, good behavior.
He was sentenced to 10 years in prison and Friday morning was released.
Number 23. A Zodiac Cipher is finally cracked. The story of the Zodiac Killer continues to intrigue owing to his elusive nature and the bizarre ciphers he produced. The Zodiac made 4 of these cryptograms, and before 2020, only 1 had been solved. The first was quickly cracked back in 1969, but for the next several decades, the remaining 3 continued to stump even the most professional codebreakers. That is, until December 2020, when another cipher was solved by private citizens. Dubbed Z340, the puzzle was originally sent on November 8, 1969, and references the Zodiac's welcoming of death.
It reads in part, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me."
He claims that his new life will be an easy one in paradise, and that he is not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send him to paradise all the sooner.
There are still 2 remaining ciphers from Zodiac that have yet to be decoded.
Number 22, the lost Roanoke Colony. One of America's biggest mysteries is also one of its simplest. A number of colonists settled in what's now North Carolina in 1585. This was known as the Roanoke Colony. Explorer John White left the colony in 1587, meaning to get more supplies in England.
White soon sailed back to England for much-needed supplies, but when he returned, he found the settlement eerily abandoned.
When he finally returned in 1590, having been delayed by war, the colony was gone, the only clue being the word Croatoan carved into the palisade. White deduced, likely correctly, that the colonists left for nearby Croatoan Island. While we don't know for sure, there is tons of circumstantial evidence showing that it's most likely the colonists moved out and assimilated with the local tribes, having lost hope of White's return.
They eventually make it to safety after a 500-mile journey to Georgia.
Indeed, the present-day Hatteras tribe considers themselves descendants of the lost Europeans.
Perhaps the colonists survived, and together with the Croatoan tribe, went on to thrive in their adoptive land.
Number 21, Dyatlov Pass. Avalanches seem to account for many mysteries. The 1959 Dyatlov Pass one has long been a famous one, with 9 hikers fleeing the safety of their tent in the dead of night and dying under puzzling conditions. Their deaths were initially attributed to a, quote, compelling natural force, and questions abounded for many decades.
And in the end, investigators are left with no explanation as to what happened.
But advancements in technology led to a sound answer in 2020, avalanche. It's likely the hikers heard the rumblings of an imminent avalanche and fled the tent in a panic. Further study suggests some got hit by a slab avalanche, hence their devastating physical injuries, and the rest got lost in the dark and passed on through hypothermia. This answer has been supported by numerous independent bodies, all of whom agree that it's the most likely scenario.
Being in this location really brought home to me just how terrifying it was for them.
Number 20, the fate of the Franklin expedition.
I will not lose another man, Francis. We may lose all our men.
For centuries, explorers sought out a northwest passage between the Atlantic and Pacific through the Arctic Ocean, but their expeditions often ended in disaster.
It's the ice, Georgie. It's only the ice.
One of the most famous was British Royal Navy officer John Franklin's in 1845. His expedition's ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, never returned. Search parties recovered only artifacts and human remains. With the passing of time, however, we've pieced together the full story. The ships got trapped in pack ice, and the crew died from starvation, hypothermia, and disease. The sunken Erebus and Terror were finally found in 2014 and 2016, respectively. Number 19, Pierre April.
Some lumps of things come back that are not especially pleasant.
Imagine waking up in a ditch with only $17 in your pocket and no idea who you are or where you came from. That's what happened to amnesiac Pierre April in May 1992. April was found wandering the streets of San Diego and taken to a shelter. Pieces of his life started coming back to him, including faces and talents, but nothing came of his attempts to connect to his past life. In September, his case was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
I was so sure this city would bring everything back, and it did not.
This episode was seen by an old colleague of April's named Carol. She phoned the show's tip line and told them all they needed to know. April was happily reunited with his family, and his memory has since recovered.
It is strange to be told who you are and what you did. I'm someone again.
Number 18, Umbrella Man. The assassination of John F. Kennedy in November 1963 prompted countless conspiracy theories. Some of the more interesting ones were about a figure spotted in photos and films of the event, who had been brandishing an umbrella despite the sunny weather.
In all of Dallas, there appears to be exactly one person standing under an open black umbrella.
Could he have been complicit in the assassination? He remained a mystery for 15 years, until 1978, when Louis Stephen Witt came forth. Witt identified himself as the Umbrella Man and said that the umbrella was meant as a symbolic protest against Kennedy. An umbrella had been the trademark accessory of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, infamous for initially appeasing the Nazi Party.
It was a reference to Neville Chamberlain's umbrella.
And with that, one of the world's most tantalizing mysteries fizzled out with a disappointing answer.
Oh, I see. Then everything is wrapped up in a neat little package. Really, I mean that.
Number 17, the Paulding Light of Michigan. Speaking of horribly disappointing answers, let's discuss the Paulding Light.
We came out here because somebody had heard about it. We were just sitting around a night, and some local people that we knew had heard about this.
Paulding is a small community in western Michigan that houses a famous piece of folklore.
One popular legend says that the light is produced by the wayward spirit of a train conductor killed when his locomotive derailed.
Just outside of town, onlookers can spot a bright light flashing on and off at the end of a valley. The people of Paulding have many supernatural explanations for this light, including ghosts. One particularly creepy story claims that it's a grandparent looking for their lost grandchild with a flickering lantern. But the truth is far more boring. Turns out it's actually just headlights from a nearby highway. So, yeah, bummer.
Had people standing here having the pictures of the vehicles on the screen of the computer, and it's like, well, that's it, and they still won't believe it.
Number 16, the Somerton Man. One of Australia's enduring mysteries may have been finally solved in the summer of 2022. On December 1st, 1948, a body was found in Adelaide's Somerton Park. He was wearing American clothes embroidered with the name Keane. Inside his pocket was a scrap of paper reading Tamam Shud, Persian for is finished. The book that this paper was torn from was eventually located, and investigators found cryptic text written on the cover.
We looked for people with no date of death on that tree. And there was one that stood out.
In July 2022, DNA helped identify the man as Carl Webb. It's also now believed that the cryptic text found in the book were the names of horses, as Webb often gambled on horse racing. And finally, the clothes were likely passed down from his nephew, who once lived in the United States. Number 15, the Bloop. Many people have a fear of the deep ocean, and it's because of things like this. The bloop was a very loud underwater noise captured in 1997 by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was so loud that it was detected by sensors over 3,000 miles away. It doesn't sound like much at normal speed, but it takes on its signature bloop noise when sped up. Believers in Cthulhu immediately went to giant underwater monster, but once again, the truth is more mundane. It wasn't a massive creature, but an ice quake as a result of glacial movements. Man, science can't let us have any fun. Number 14, Anastasia's fate.
In the grave, there was supposed to be 11 bodies, but only 9 were there.
On July 17, 1918, far-left revolutionaries, the Bolsheviks, murdered the Russian Imperial Romanov family. In the aftermath, rumors circulated that Grand Duchess Anastasia, who was 17, had somehow escaped and survived. Her body could not be located, and several people came forward claiming to be the lost Anastasia. However, these stories turned out to be outright lies or the result of mental health issues, as was the case with famous imposter Anna Anderson. The long-standing rumor was officially put to rest when the remains of the royal family were identified with DNA. Grand Duchess Anastasia was among them, proving that she died with the rest of the Romanovs. Number 13, Lady Be Good. The World War II bomber Lady Be Good was used to conduct a raid on Naples on April 4, 1943. However, it disappeared on its way back to Libya, and both the plane and its crew were considered lost. No one knew what happened, and the plane was not recovered. That is until 1958, when the crashed aircraft was spotted in the Libyan desert. This raised even more questions, as the plane was remarkably preserved and showed no signs of the crew.
Where's the pilot? I don't understand! Where's the crew? Hey!
All the questions were subsequently answered after an investigation. The pilots had gotten lost in a sandstorm and ejected from the craft when it ran out of fuel. The plane crashed, and the men died while walking through the desert. Number 12. Sailing stones. It's one of the most bizarre sights that can be seen in nature. A lone rock stands in the middle of the desert. A massive trail snakes behind it, as if it's been pushed across the ground. However, no footsteps and no signs of animal activity can be found. These stones are especially notable in the racetrack playa of California's Death Valley.
All these funny parallel trails that are clearly there's some sort of common force involved.
So just what the heck is going on with these rocks? The phenomenon has tantalized researchers for decades, but the mystery has only recently been cracked. The valley floor produces a very thin layer of ice, and the rocks slide across these sheets when the ice starts to melt. The movement leaves indentations in the ground, resulting in their signature trails. Number 11. The death of Junlin.
His mother still worried about him living in a big foreign city, so he'd walk the streets with his cell phone and stream images back to her. His message to her in their daily conversations was always the same. Don't worry, he told her. I'm safe.
One of the most notorious videos in the history of the internet was uploaded on May 25, 2012. Titled One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, it depicts an Asian male getting killed and dismembered by an unidentified figure.
So you could see that clearly the murder happened on the bed.
Various body parts were then sent to schools and federal offices across Canada, and these remains were linked to the man who was killed in the video. The case made international headlines and remained a mystery for several days. But investigators quickly traced the grisly homicide to a man named Luca Magnotta, who had already fled the country. An international manhunt ensued, and Magnotta was finally captured in Berlin on June 4th, about a week and a half after uploading the infamous video.
Luca Magnotta, who's been the focus of an international manhunt since fleeing Canada last week, was arrested by police at an internet
He will eventually face Canada's justice system. He's expected to go before a judge tomorrow.
Number 10. The face on Mars.
Was there once an advanced civilization on Mars? Some of the features on the planet's surface definitely make you wonder.
This is one of the most popular space images of all time. Taken by the Viking orbiters back in the mid-70s, the picture depicts the Cydonia region of Mars. People immediately noticed that one of the features bore a striking resemblance to a human face, or maybe one of those old-school hockey masks.
Everything is proportional. If the face is 1.5 miles, 2 miles long, the eyes 1/4 mile, nose about 1/2 mile. So it's not small structure, it's very large structure.
Speculation immediately flew to aliens or some kind of human habitation on the supposedly barren planet. But nah, the answer is much more boring. Turns out this was just an optical illusion, the result of lighting, angle, and a low-resolution picture. More recent and much better photos have been taken of the same location, and they reveal nothing but a boring hill with face-like characteristics. Number 9. The construction of the pyramids. The Giza pyramids are arguably the most famous landmarks in the world. They continue to stand tall literally after thousands of years. Their construction has baffled people for millennia, leading some to suggest that aliens must have been involved. After all, humans couldn't possibly drag and lift those stones into place, right? Well, yes, they could. Researchers believe that workers loaded the blocks onto sledges and wet the sand to make them easier to drag. They raised the blocks using ramps and levering techniques. This took tens of thousands of people decades to complete. But hey, no one said building a wonder of the world was easy. Number 8. The Tunguska event. In the early morning of June 30th, 1908, a remote area of Russia was hit with a massive and mysterious blast.
In 1 hour, the explosion and the great fire that followed destroy a region of forest the size of Greater London.
People who observed that thought the end of the world had come, Judgment Day, divine intervention.
This blast completely leveled over 800 square miles of forest and flattened 80 million trees. No source could be found for the explosion, so no one knew what exactly happened.
It's an event and it's a mystery that would take 105 years of research before we could finally write the words.
The end.
Thousands of scientific papers have been written about the incident, and the area has been studied for decades, with many trying to crack the bizarre case. It is now generally agreed that a 200-foot meteor traveling 60,000 miles per hour exploded in midair over the area, resulting in what's called a meteor airburst. This airburst then leveled everything below the meteor's detonation site.
If it was a meteorite and the Earth had turned a bit further, it would have destroyed St. Petersburg. An hour later, it would have destroyed Helsinki. 1 hour later, Stockholm, and after that, Oslo.
Number 7. The death of Ryan Stallings. Patricia Stallings brought her sick baby Ryan to the hospital. The doctors found what they thought was ethylene glycol in the baby's blood, leading them to conclude that he had been poisoned. He recovered, but Patricia was suspected of the poisoning, and Ryan was sent to live elsewhere.
And I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. I mean, Ryan was my world.
Following a future visit, Ryan fell sick again and died. Patricia was again blamed for poisoning Ryan and charged with homicide.
His mother, Patty, was now charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral.
She later gave birth to another son, and he exhibited the same symptoms. It was later found that both children suffered from a disorder called methylmalonic acidemia. An acidic byproduct of the disorder can be mistaken for ethylene glycol.
It would be very simple to confuse the diagnosis of MMA with multiple poisonings because the symptoms are very similar.
Patricia was released from prison and successfully sued the lab that tested Ryan's blood. Number 6. Stonehenge.
The awe-inspiring stone circle is an enduring mystery. Despite centuries of intense scrutiny,
one of humanity's greatest marvels, Stonehenge has been standing for thousands of years.
the widely accepted theory is that the Stonehenge landscape was a large cemetery, a place to bury and worship the dead.
But where exactly did the giant stones come from? They're all pretty much symmetrical, 13 feet high, 7 feet across, and each weighing 25 tons. Experts have been trying to crack the case for hundreds of years. Some will have you believe that it was aliens, but no. It was really just the nearby woods. In 2019, researchers were able to do tests on a small area of extracted stone and sourced it to the nearby Westwoods in Wiltshire. The location has finally been pinned down, but one tantalizing question remains. How did they drag these 25-ton boulders 15 miles to the south?
Clearly some very, very powerful people around at that time who are being able to control resources, control the labour force, to create some of the largest monuments we've ever seen.
Number 5. The Centennial Olympic Park Criminal.
The North Carolina mountains, ground zero for the largest, most expensive fugitive search in United States history.
On July 27, 1996, Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park was bombed during the Summer Olympic Games. The blast injured hundreds, but thanks to the heroic efforts of security guard Richard Jewell, direct deaths were limited to 2 people.
Move away from the town! Go toward the street, anything but here! Are you kidding me? We gotta move, there's a bomb!
Jewell himself was initially pegged as the culprit, but he was eventually cleared and the case remained a mystery for several years. The FBI was eventually led to a man named Eric Rudolph, who had committed various other bombings across the American South. Rudolph was finally arrested in 2003 and pleaded guilty to all charges. He was given 4 life sentences and is currently held in a supermax prison in Colorado.
He had 1 live bomb and 250 pounds of explosives buried in the mountains here. He agreed to tell the government where it all was in exchange for life sentences.
Number 4. The disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi.
Trump administration touched off a new storm of criticism over the killing of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi.
The U.S. has sanctioned some Saudis in response, but the Crown Prince has yet to face any punishment.
The case of journalist Jamal Khashoggi was all over the news in the fall of 2018. On October 2nd of that year, Khashoggi went missing while visiting the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. At the time, Khashoggi was living in exile, as he was penning scathing articles that criticized the Saudi Arabian rulers.
And I think his knowledge of the regime added credibility to his profession as a journalist when he spoke out.
While his fate remained a mystery for weeks, most people had a good idea what happened. Khashoggi was killed inside the consulate. It was eventually revealed that Khashoggi did indeed die inside the building, and on October 25th, Saudi Arabia's Attorney General admitted that it was a premeditated homicide. The CIA later concluded that Khashoggi was assassinated on the orders of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman.
There was credible evidence that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other Saudi senior officials were liable for the killing.
Number 3. The Golden State Killer. One of the most notorious criminals in American history, the Golden State Killer has gone by many names. He terrorized California throughout the 70s and 80s, sexually assaulting at least 51 women, burglarizing over 100 homes, and murdering 13 people. He was given different names in different areas, including the Visalia Ransacker and the Night Stalker. Only with time did it become apparent that these crime sprees were the work of one person. The name Golden State Killer was coined in 2013 by crime writer Michelle McNamara. The case helped inspire the creation of California's DNA database, and it was DNA evidence that eventually nabbed Joseph James D'Angelo in 2018, who by then was 72 years old. He was sentenced to life in prison.
I think we all had come to terms that we would never see justice in this case. Neither one of them in any way, shape, or form should have ever died this way.
Number 2. The collapse of the Maya civilization. The largest and most sophisticated pre-Columbian civilization of the Americas, the Maya flourished for thousands of years.
They mastered mathematics and astronomy, perfected the first written language of the Western Hemisphere, and produced stunning works of art.
The civilization entered its so-called classic period in the year 250, and this lasted until 900. It was around then that the entire political system collapsed, and the Maya abandoned their most important cities to move north. With this, the Maya civilization entered what is called its post-classic period. So what the heck happened? It's a mystery that has plagued historians for years. The answer was finally found in the 21st century. It turns out the Maya were so overpopulated that they damaged the environment and created a devastating drought.
The extreme intensity of these droughts was disastrous, making a carefully managed response their only hope.
With their agriculture thoroughly destroyed, the Maya were forced to abandon their most populous cities.
Today, the empty jungles of the Yucatan serve as a reminder that even great civilizations can fail.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. The Vampire Clan. One of the creepiest episodes of Unsolved Mysteries involves Rod Ferrell and his so-called vampire clan.
Ferrell and his clan reportedly liked to play vampire at various places around town. One favorite hangout was an abandoned building they called the Vampire Hotel.
In November of 1996, Jennifer Wendorf found her parents beaten to death inside their Florida home. The case went unsolved for weeks, although police immediately suspected Ferrell in the killing, as he was close to the Wendorf's other daughter, Heather. Ferrell was the leader of a Kentucky cult centered around vampirism, and allegedly had prospective members drink his blood in order to join.
That he would cut his arm and let others suck his blood as sort of some kind of ritualistic, they call it being embraced into the family.
The grandmother of a member helped police apprehend the cult, and both Ferrell and a man named Scott Anderson were found responsible for the Wendorf's deaths and given life sentences.
While the couple's daughter Heather was arrested along with Ferrell, Howard Scott Anderson, Dana Cooper, and Charity Kesey, all who were sent to prison. A grand jury believed Heather was unaware of the murder plot and she was not tried.
Do you know of any other cool mysteries that were solved? Let us know in the comments below.
The black smoke, the monster. What is it?
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.